Amelia Island celebrates Fish to Fork on May 15th to 18th, 2025 at Omni Amelia Island Resort and Spa, featuring fishing and culinary dock-to-dish specialties in a fun, interactive atmosphere. More info at ameliaisland.com/fish-to-fork. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. A state attorney's office investigation into an allegedly illegal gun registry at city buildings. Bears caught in the literal crosshairs after a fatal attack and a local city sighting. Doctors' version of a recent jail death differs from JSO's. School officials police social media for teachers but spare themselves similar scrutiny. And Jax Beach joins its coastal neighbors in banning all types of smoking. We'll talk about all that and more with our panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. Later, playwrights new and old present their latest work as part of a project showcase in St. Augustine. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump is now saying an 80% tariff on imported Chinese goods, quote, seems right. Writing online, Trump says it's up to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's meeting Chinese economic officials this weekend. Businesses in the United Kingdom are trying to figure out what a new U.S.-UK trade deal means for them. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports from London.
Stocks are up in British car companies, Rolls-Royce and Aston Martin, after officials said this deal cuts U.S. tariffs on most British cars. They said it also eliminates tariffs completely for British steel and aluminum and cuts U.K. tariffs on ethanol from the U.S. But President Trump said other details are still being written up. For example, it's unclear whether U.S. e-commerce firms like Amazon will get a break from the U.K. digital services tax. Speaking at a conference in Iceland, the head of the UK's central bank calls the deal good news, but points out tariffs are still higher than before Trump took office. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, London.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says that the migrant illegally deported to El Salvador in March will not be coming back to the U.S. Noem spoke to a Senate panel yesterday about the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. The U.S. Supreme Court has told the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen questioned Noem about his case.
Simple question. Are you taking any action to facilitate his return, or are you not?
This administration is following and complying with all federal court orders to make sure that we...
So you are, because the court ordered that you facilitate his return, so you are facilitating his return.
Sir, Senator, thank you for the question, but what I would tell you is that we are following court orders and that your advocacy for a known terrorist is alarming to me.
Madam Secretary...
It's alarming to me because he's a human smuggler.
Madam Secretary, I'm going to have to reclaim it.
And a terrorist, and he's not a U.S. citizen.
Democrats say the issue is not about citizenship. It's that Abrego Garcia was denied due process as required by the Constitution. Newly elected Pope Leo XIV celebrated his first public mass as head of the Catholic Church this morning. NPR's Jason DeRose reports from Rome.
The Bible readings for the Mass in the Sistine Chapel were in English, Spanish, and Latin, two of them read by women. Pope Leo began his homily in English before switching to Italian.
I invite you to recognize the marvels that the Lord has done, the blessings that the Lord continues to pour out upon all of us.
He preached on the story from the Gospel of Matthew, in which Jesus tells the disciple Peter that he will build his church upon him, the rock. The sermon went on to warn of the dangers of practical atheism, the idea that one leads one's life without concern about God. Jason DeRose, NPR News, Rome.
You're listening to NPR News.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Catholics around the world are celebrating the election of a new pope. The news and the fact that he's an American from Chicago came as a great surprise to Bishop Eric Pohlmeyer, head of the Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine. We reached Bishop Pohlmeyer shortly after Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, blessed the thousands of people gathered outside St. Peter's Basilica in Rome.
When I heard them say Prevost, I was shocked that they had selected an American for the first time, and then hearing the name Leo XIV, just beautiful moment for the history of the church, and a great moment for the grace of God in the world.
The 69-year-old pontiff was elected by the College of Cardinals to replace Pope Francis, who died on April 21st. Southeast Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter has become the first Republican to jump into the race to challenge Democratic U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff in 2026. The 67-year-old Carter called himself a MAGA warrior in his campaign announcement on Thursday. At least 6 other Georgia Republicans say they're considering a run for Senate. Best known among them is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. More rain is in the forecast today here in Northeast Florida and during the weekend. We have the chance for scattered showers and thunderstorms for coastal areas, then areas around the I-10 corridor and to the north this afternoon. Highs will be in the mid to upper 80s, with lows getting down into the upper 60s to lower 70s overnight. We have the chance for heavy rain and isolated thunderstorms in the afternoon, both Saturday and Sunday.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
At the Tributary. Good morning, Nate.
Good morning, Ann.
David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody.
And Jack Webb, attorney and former city council president. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
So, David, you have been doing a heck of a job reporting on a big story from this week. State Attorney Melissa Nelson is investigating whether the city of Jacksonville illegally kept logs of gun owners' information at a couple of city buildings. Why is this investigation happening?
Well, what we know is there was a gun log that was kept where whenever a person entering City Hall or the Yates building was carrying a concealed weapon, which are legally allowed to carry into those buildings, the security guards were asking them or telling them they needed to provide their name, driver's license information, the type of gun, the make and model of it. And then that information was entered into a gun logbook and kept there as a record. So there is a state law that's been on the books since 2004 that says a local government cannot keep a gun registry, a record, or a list of gun owners and their weapons. So on the face of it, this gun log was a list, was a record of the gun owners' names and their firearms. So that triggers the investigation in terms of whether there was a knowing and willful act by the city to have these logbooks kept at the security checkpoints at these two buildings. And then parallel along with that, there's the question of who knew about it, who authorized it, who approved it, who was informed about it, who sought the change, who sought to put these gun books out there, which started in July 24th of 2023 and continued up until really late April when a gun owner complained about the policy, and the city then ended the gun logs and stopped doing that record keeping of people walking into those two buildings with the guns.
And that's our understanding, is that this initially began as kind of a complaint from a gun owner who said you shouldn't be using those logs.
That's exactly right. The gun owner was going with the concealed carry weapon into the Yates building, was asked for a driver's license, and then that sort of led to the complaint being lodged either with the city or with the state attorney. I'm not exactly sure, but that triggered the investigation that started, and everything that's happened since then in terms of trying to determine who knew what. And of course, the state attorney sent out some subpoenas this week. We're really asking for a large amount of information in terms of communications, texts, emails, policies, drafts, really to kind of establish a timeline for what happened.
And Jack, the city council had begun saying that they were going to drill down on this. They were going to conduct an investigation to find out what happened. And the state attorney basically asked them to stand down.
I think that's right. I think it's great that she did and that they agreed to do so, because we don't need let Melissa Nelson's office do their job. They are competent. That's what they're there for. It's interesting though to see where this goes. I looked at the statute, did a deep dive on this thing. It's going to be really interesting. This statute's been around since 2004, by the way, okay? It begs the question, is there an intent requirement, to the willful knowing component of the statute? Because obviously there was willful. They did it, and they knew they were doing it. But what was the intent behind it? I find it really intriguing that the date of this policy was supposed to be July 1, 2023, which significantly is the date that the modification of the concealed weapons license in the state of Florida changed. So I think this was a measure, a policy that was designed to address that change in Florida statute. So it'll be interesting.
Remind us what that change was.
I'm sorry. You no longer, at that point, my understanding of it, based on my deep dive in the last 24 hours, was although you could carry a weapon, a concealed weapon in the state of Florida, you still needed to, in order to do so, you still needed to satisfy the requirements prior to get a concealed weapon
like have
license.
A permit, essentially.
Well, essentially, so you needed a driver's license. You have to have a government ID. You have to be over the age of 21. You can't be a convicted felon. So all of the requirements that previously needed to be satisfied to get the license, you still had to adhere to or be compliant with, but you just didn't have. You had to show that. But so again, there's a gap in the statute. So what are you supposed to do? It'll be interesting to see the work product from the general counsel's office, perhaps, again, because this didn't arise out of the ether. Prior to the drafting of the policy was not unilaterally done. Somebody from the general counsel's office said, listen, we've got an issue here. The statute's changing. We've got to address this. So it was addressed. So it'll be interesting what the conclusions of the general counsel's office were prior to the implementation of the policy.
The timing is not insignificant, Nate, because this all happened right around the transition of power between the former mayor, Lenny Curry, and the current mayor, Donna Deegan. There's a date on this policy change of July 1, which is the date of that transition. That's when the new mayor is sworn. It doesn't appear necessarily, according to David's reporting, that it took effect on that day, but it was drafted before that day. And so it's kind of on this threshold, and there's already a lot of back and forth about who's responsible, which administration.
Yeah, David has done the reporting on this. I've been a consumer of the story like most people. And I guess from the cheap seats, not unlike other city controversies that have kind of come and gone in the past. I suppose I wonder how much concern there actually is about the underlying act, which is, to Jack's point, I think was born out of somebody whose job is to keep people safe in city buildings was put in a fraught position because of Florida's kind of Wild West gun laws. They come up with this inelegant solution. It's on the books for a few years. I think the heat and light around this is probably more concentrated at this point on like who is going to be stuck in the chair when the music runs out, who is going to get tagged with the technical violation. So there's this parsing of like, when was the transition in charge? And like, I don't know, it feels a little bit like it's easy to lose the plot here.
Yeah. And David, you have gotten a bunch of records from the city that are the same records that the state attorney's office has been pursuing, trying to kind of discern that, right? When did this get drafted? Who ordered it to be drafted? When did it take effect? Who ordered it to take effect? And in fact, at least according to your reporting, at least some of that points to a public works employee whose name is not familiar to most of us. He's a facilities manager and sort of in charge of, public works oversees safety in those buildings, the contract.
Right. Following up on what Jack was talking about in terms of the timeline. So July 1st, 2023 was significant for two things. One, that was when Mayor Deegan was sworn into office. And it also was when this state law changed where prior to then, you could carry a concealed weapon into city buildings if you had a concealed carry license. And then after, starting July 1st, 2023, you could carry it in even if you didn't have a license. So obviously the Public Works Department, the public facilities, they're kind of preparing for that change. They have directions they give to security guards, and they add a section to the directions on the concealed carry, how the security guards should handle concealed carry weapons. And that particular set of instructions was approved in what I guess you consider draft form on June 30th, the last day of Mayor Curry's term in office. July 1st, the law changes. July 1st, Mayor Deegan takes office. The directives don't take effect right away. There's some more review, evaluation, study. At one point, there's an email that sends out to from the Public Works Facilities Director to the security firm saying these changes have not been approved yet. Then on July 24th, there's the final set of approved directions go out, and that's when the logbooks start to be kept. So there's about 24 days of back and forth before they actually put it in place.
Hold that thought. I mean, is there any indication from what you've seen that the advice or the recommendation or the policy changed between the draft form and the eventual enforcement?
No, that stayed the same for the directions for the concealed carry section of the instructions. The one that went in effect July 24th was the same one that was put forward on June 30th. So no change there. I think there were some other things they were looking at as well. So then the question is, obviously, it clearly was approved by a mid-level administrator in the Public Works Department who, it's not surprising that person would be involved in this. That's the person's job, is to be in charge of the security of city buildings. And I think Melissa Nelson's investigation is also looking at, okay, who else knew about it? Who else might have instructed that change in policy? What was the back and forth between hires up? Did it get run up the flagpole? And who knew during the Curry administration that this review was being done and this policy was possibly going to be put into place? And obviously, who knew in the Deegan administration? Because there are a lot of text messages and emails being sought by pretty high-ranking administrators in her office.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Nate Monroe, Jack Webb, and David Bauerlein about the week's headlines. You can join the conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media. You can also watch our live stream right now on Facebook or the WJCT YouTube page. This has been pretty furiously denounced, Jack Webb, by Lenny Curry, the former mayor. He has said in interviews that he has double and triple checked and that he knows, that his administration was not behind, did not enforce this order. He sent out a statement saying, if these reports are accurate, City Hall, they've not only crossed a legal line, they've shattered the public trust. It's a blatant violation of the law, one that opens the door to serious legal consequences and exposes taxpayers to costly litigation. He also called it reckless and deeply irresponsible. If what David says, it's clear that at least some portion of this began, while he was still in office. How is he going to thread that needle?
I don't know. That's a great question. The words that he chose were well chosen. That is, my administration never enforced this. Well, of course you didn't, because you weren't in office on July 1, 2023. You were gone, all right? Moreover, there was no need to enforce it because the Florida state law statute with the concealed weapons license only changed in July 1, 2023. But Mr. Curry, Mayor Curry, you can't deny the fact that the general counsel who reported to you at this particular time probably gave legal advice to your administration because you guys drafted it. It was implemented under Donna Deegan's administration, but you guys drafted it, as David said before. All right, it was nothing changed between the June 30th, 2023 proposal and what was finally implemented. So you guys both own it. So let's those people, live in glass houses should not throw stones. one thing that jumps out at me in the story was how quickly Melissa Nelson's office jumped on it and how quickly the Bedell Ditmar firm was retained. And, I looked at
and
this.
that's the Bedell Ditmar. That's Hancock's
That's
firm.
correct. That's correct.
And the city hired them as their attorney, outside attorney.
Yes, correct. And again, I looked at the statute. The statute affords no discretion. It says the state attorney shall investigate upon a complaint. So she had, given the political climate in which we live here in the state of Florida and the attorney general looking over her shoulder, of course she's going to jump into it. But moreover, the statute also said shall prosecute where evidence could lead to a violation of the statute. So, and what's unfortunate as well, I feel bad for these mid-level management people who are getting sucked into this thing because statute prohibits public funds from being used to defend these people. So the past mayor's comment as to taxpayer dollars is kind of inaccurate.
It prevents them from being used to defend these people if they're not successful? Or?
Correct. If public funds may not be used to defend the unlawful conduct of any person charged with a violation of this section unless charges are dismissed or fraud is not found, or violation is not found.
So that's in the statute prohibiting these logbooks. It says basically if you lose your case, you can't rely on the government to pay to defend you.
If you lose your case and you are adjudicated guilty, the government will not pay you. The only way you get paid, you can recoup your attorney's fees if the charges are dropped or if you are found not guilty. But if you are charged with the crime, it's on your dime until you get a positive adjudication of some sort.
And Nate, the penalties are not insignificant. I mean, up to 5 years in prison, up to $5 million in penalties. It is be a huge setback for somebody, for instance, who worked in a mid-level job in public works.
Yeah, and no offense, but I mean, this is the most boring potential crime that I think has ever been discussed. Again, we're debating it was drawn in the last administration, but the transition was around and who, these are, again, I from the cheap seats, it just seems to me like the parlor game here is who is going to get caught with the technical, not actually any real concern over what was going on, because we know what was going on. Somebody had the job of trying to protect people in city buildings and had to make a call in a kind of fraud environment. There is this law in the books. We all at this table know the legislature likes to pass statement laws and performative laws to signal their values. Was there a concern in 2004 that local governments were going to impose tyranny and make gun owners, it just seems all very silly on some level that we're debating all of this. And yes, there are serious consequences. That's just sort of the nature of living in Florida sometimes, I suppose.
And I got to tell you, I have this recurring vision of Nick Howland giggling coquettishly when he concluded that there was a possible violation here, and he went to first.
He's a city council member.
He's city council member. Yeah. He's the chairman of the rules committee. He's like, wow, got him. Let's go.
There is this Cheshire cat-like grin that you can almost sort of feel when you read some of these comments. Yep. And it's, again, I've been around these city controversies, and often it's when you're in the room, everyone kind of knows what's going on here. Everyone knows why there is a lot of attention on this particular issue. We're all just kind of waiting to see who is going to get, stuck in the chair when the music runs out.
David, this is obviously going to take a lot of resources, time, and clearly kind of political oxygen before it burns out. But do you see it as Nate does, as more of a kind of performative investigation, or is it something that you think people are really seriously concerned about the actions that were taken as opposed to just sort of the political impact?
Well, I think it's a state attorney's office. You don't write the laws, you enforce them. And the law is pretty clear that, a government entity cannot keep a registry, list, or record. And it seems clear that was exactly what was done. So, whether the law itself is something people disagree with or think goes over the top, it is something that's been on the books since 2004. And it is something where there is, for people who are gun owners and believe really fervently in the Second Amendment, the idea of having to give personal information is offensive to them. And they do, whether they have concerns that it could be used or abused. I guess I probably wouldn't want to have to go to City Hall and be told that if I want to go to a department, I have to provide my license, my name, and it has to go in a book, and it's kept there by the government. You kind of feel like, hey, you go to a city government meeting, you shouldn't even have to sign your name if you don't want to. So the idea is for people who really believe in the constitutional carrying of weapons, they feel like they shouldn't be singled out for having to provide that information. And that's something the legislature has decided as well should be punishable with a third-degree felony. It's a serious offense in the views of the law.
We've got a call from Linda in Mandarin. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Good morning. I just want to do a bullet run of the hypocrisy we're talking about, which I like to point out. I don't think we're able to carry weapons, concealed or not, into the State House, but it's okay to do it into other jurisdictions without the state. Also, in terms of our information having to give, it appears that gun owners have much more rights than people have. How much of this is going on to people using guns in crimes and people who are protected when they are bringing it into a building. And third, in terms of not wanting to give information when they go into a building, well, think about what's happening in our environment right now, where people writing an op-ed in a college paper are snatched off the street. So I think the hypocrisy is really thick. We just need to call a thing a thing. This is a political game, because think about it. What better way, if I was a conspiracy theory, what would I do? I would draft this right before a change of administration when you're coming in and you don't know what's going on. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theory, but if I was and was going to write a book, I would draft that right before I was leaving office. And, the next mayor is committing crimes that's going to cost us $5 million a day, blah, blah, blah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Linda. We also have a message from Tom on Facebook. He says, I have to go through 2 security checkpoints at the city council and can't carry in nail clippers or a pocket knife, but others can carry in a firearm. One concealed carry holder regularly yells accusations at the council. I no longer feel safe there. It is my understanding, David, and correct me if I'm wrong, that while you can bring concealed carry into City Hall, you're not actually supposed to bring it into the chambers.
That's correct. So when the city council is meeting in the council chambers, and I think just for their regular city council meetings, which happen every other Tuesday, then you cannot carry that concealed weapon into council chambers. So I guess you could carry it into City Hall on that night, but then when you get to the door to go into the council chambers, you
put
cannot
it in
carry
like
it
a
any
potted
further.
plant, or what do you do?
So that's why you have to go. I guess so. That's why you have to go through two checkpoints.
Wow, this is what tyranny looks like. I mean, what a horrible situation. Are they? This is deeply troubling, right? The councils, are they going to rush to change the policy? Has that been discussed?
Well, they are allowed to prevent the guns from coming in during their council meeters, and they do have that in place. So, yeah.
What's unfortunate in this thing is, to Nate's point before, was there intent to violate anybody's constitutional rights here or Florida statute? No. You're between a rock and a hard place. You're a dude who's charged with keeping people safe. And, we've got this tension between public safety and the ability to carry a firearm into a public place. How do you resolve that dichotomy? And in that conflict results in a mid-level management person perhaps being left without a chair when the music stops.
Right. Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the week's big headlines, and you can join our conversation by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to move on now, though, to a topic that the Tributary has been covering, Nate. This has to do with a jail death that you've been reporting on. What was it that new that you all learned this week about this incident?
Yeah, so we obtained the medical records, the UF Health records for Charles Faggart when he had been brought on April 7th from the jail to the hospital in very bad condition, to say the least. He arrived and was unresponsive. And I guess on a broad level, what I'll say is that these medical records contradicted key elements of JSO's some of the information that JSO has put out, the very limited information that the agency has put out about this, about Charles Faggert's death and why he died.
What did we know prior to? I mean, you said that it was April 7th incident. I think it was maybe the following day that the sheriff said this incident had happened. A number of correctional officers and a sergeant had been suspended, I guess, or taken
Stripped of their authority, suspended.
hmm and then it was, I think, the next day, perhaps, that that Mr. Faggart was declared brain dead or officially dead. But what were we told early on? What do we know, kind of, from the official version? And then, how did the records that you all obtained this week provide additional context on that?
Sure. Initially, JSO seemed to want to say as little as possible. Didn't even want to identify Charles Faggart. The Tributary and other media outlets did eventually figure out who he was, figured out that he was in the jail on a couple of misdemeanor charges. And shortly after that, after criticism from Mr. Faggart's family about kind of a lack of transparency around this death, JSO released a heavily redacted police report about what took place in the jail. And, look, most of it was redacted. There were some interesting things that were not redacted. One of them is an allegation that Charles Faggart verbalized at some point that he did fentanyl. There is another detail in the report that an officer claims that they saw Mr. Faggart suffer a seizure. Those are things that the medical records seem to rebut. When he got to UF Health, doctors did a urine analysis and found that there was no fentanyl in his system. They also did not see any sign that he had suffered a seizure. They also found a barb from a stun gun in his back, which clearly implies that he was tased. This was not something that was in the unredacted portion of that police report, assuming it's in there. And so, those were all new details we did not have before, and that seemed to contradict things that are in that police report. And that report was written by one of the officers who was suspended by the sheriff in the wake of all of this.
I want to ask you about that redaction, or what, more to the point, was not redacted, because, these reports, there are broad public records exemptions when there's an active investigation, when there's medical information particular to someone who's in custody. And so there are a lot of things that can be redacted. The fact that, the claim about a possible fentanyl connection or a seizure were not redacted, I don't want to be overly cynical about it, but I'm curious if you can see a reason why those elements might not have been redacted, may not have fallen under the law that allows those to be exempt from public release, when so many other things were redacted.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, and to be clear, just because something is exempt from public disclosure does not mean that it is by law not that you can't release it. JSO has the discretion to release whatever they want. And they often sort of use this broad-based, we're trying to protect the integrity of the investigation, so we're going to keep some stuff. They get to release what they want. And a cynical person would say that JSO in the past has a tendency to release information that maybe makes them look good, that might bolster their account of something that happened in a disputed case. They certainly have the power to do that if that's what they wanted to do. And so, as a journalist, like, I am very skeptical of these claims that, releasing bits of information harm the integrity. All these officers were there. So, like, is there some danger they're going to see the details about the things they did to this guy and, like, be better informed about him, like, in the media? Like, I don't understand some of this, and JSO doesn't have to explain it.
Jack, I want to ask you about some of the other findings, because, again, we don't know what occurred. We don't know what prompted necessarily this encounter between the officers and Mr. Faggart. But he did have substantial injuries aside from, the barb. I mean, he came, according to the reports that Nate reported on this week, that his reporter Nicole Manna reported on this week, included, some broken facial area, broken ribs.
Deep contusions, damage to the liver and kidneys.
Right. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that could happen. He could have been self-injurious, possibly.
As an attorney who has litigated these types of matters, sometimes you need to build the record, inferentially upon information and belief. Are the allegations plausible that we put in the complaint upon information and belief? But looking at the JSO report, I mean, first of all, to your other point, Ann, the drugs are involved. Yes. He's being escorted to the dorm, deemed to be a threat. What else? He placed in a restraint chair. Redaction. What happened in the restraint chair? Okay. Then, no redaction. Eyes were flushed with saline. Was he pepper sprayed? Don't know. Spit mask was removed. When was the spit mask placed? Escorted to his cell. Redacted. Restraint chair again. Then they placed him in the restraint chair, and we placed in the restraint chair, and then he's got deep bruises to his kidneys and his liver. He's got broken bones. I mean, that's not someone throwing himself up against a jail wall. I mean, what happened when he was in that restraint chair?
Well, I do think that the records indicated, at least the possibility that chest compressions, that CPR is a very violent act. I mean, we don't always think about it that way, but you can get very badly broken getting it. He did receive CPR, and I think that even the medical team, David said, could be, partially responsible for some of the damage that we've seen, the broken rib particularly.
Yeah, I guess that could make sense. Yeah, it is to do that kind of compression. You're really putting a lot of force and weight on the chest. I thought it was it's a terrific report. I read through it and I thought, okay, we know yet again that there's fractures on his face and ribs, bruises throughout his body, and damage to his kidneys and liver. We still don't know what caused that. I mean, and the fentanyl, when the report saying that he talked about he'd taken fentanyl, even if he had taken fentanyl, I mean, that's an opiate, right? I mean, it's not going to cause somebody to go berserk and out of control. It's the opposite. It would kind of be a sedative type thing. So, and now we clearly know that from this report, he did not have fentanyl in his bloodstream. So it's not related to drugs, whatever happened. Well, and then it seems like it's not a seizure either, where some sort of physical reaction just caused him to sort of thrash about, possibly, and cause these injuries. So what did cause all these injuries while he was there, and they were so bad that he died at the hospital from them?
I mean, I just would push back a little bit on that. If he said he used fentanyl and he's in jail and he's using what he thinks is fentanyl, it could be anything, right? I mean, so that bit of information could say, well, you used something and perhaps it caused all of these other reactions. I mean, so we don't, to be fair, we don't know that, but this is, part of an ongoing reporting that you guys are doing. There have been concerns about this lack of transparency, Nate, as you've said. What are you hearing from the family's attorney about whether they feel, kind of more looped in now that more information has become available?
My understanding about the family's posture is that they are where they've been, which is that I don't think that they view the sheriff's office as having been transparent with them. And, their attorney has been on the record multiple times now with that concern. They have learned things about Mr. Faggart through the media. And that's something they find unacceptable. I think it's a parent myself. I can probably relate to, a feeling of great upset about all of this. So, yeah.
Do we know anything that governs that kind of disclosure? Who makes that decision, Jack, when it's the sheriff's office dealing with, a family? Clearly, there could be potential litigation in this. I don't think that there's anybody that thinks otherwise. And so, is there a legal justification for them to be so guarded to only release information publicly as opposed to presenting it initially to family members?
It depends upon my understanding of the statute, whatever the statute is. I litigated this issue about a year or 2 years ago down in Hernando County, trying to get records on redacted reports from the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. And they have to, upon demand, they have to provide a justification for the redaction, for failure to, or for the refusal or the reliance upon the state statute. It's almost like a privilege log in federal or state litigation. All right, you're going to withhold this information. You're going to withhold this document. Well, you need to describe what section of the statute you're relying upon and what's the nature of the information. So you challenge it and, well, okay, we'll give you the information.
Well, I do want to move on to a different topic, a very sort of different tenor, but, also big in the headlines. It's been sort of a wild couple weeks here in Florida. We've had a fatal gator attack, a rabid coyote in Atlantic Beach. But we're going to be discussing the black bear, which really could have serious implications for the creature's future, plans for a hunt, which we've discussed on this program. And so state officials are, looking at controlling the bear population. And we know that for the first time in state history, there's been this fatal bear attack, which has been getting a lot of attention. David, what do we know about this incident, and what has been the response so far since this man and his dog were killed by a bear?
Well, I think they're still investigating whether they did kill 3 bears, black bears, after this, and they still trying to determine whether those bears were the ones that attacked this man and the dog, and whether there were separate attacks or what. But it is the first fatal attack of a bear on a Florida person. So there's 4,000 black bears in the state, so it's not a small number, but it's not a huge number. And there are encounters, seemingly increasingly encounters now between people and the bears as there's more development, and as the bears also get used to foraging and, people's yards and trash and whatnot. So it is creating more of that sort of conflict. And yeah, I guess you can reduce the number of bears, and that would be a simple way to do it, right? But these are bears that have been gaining in population, and it's kind of like what you might see in some of these other states where wolf populations are growing, and then there's this backlash to that.
Yeah. And Nate, we've been talking about the possibility of a bear hunt because the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is considering that. They had a meeting in December where staff said, look, we don't think it's necessarily needed, that no action was needed. They were just kind of giving an update on the bear population. But the members of that commission are pretty strongly in favor of reinstating a hunt. The last one was in 2015, so it would be the first in 20 years. And a lot of people are believing that this incident is probably going to make that, if not, certain, at least a lot more likely.
Yeah, I mean, that is a method of wildlife management that feels very Florida coded to me. So I would not be surprised if there is one.
Yeah, and Jack, the state did adopt a new amendment in this last election that basically makes hunting and fishing sort of the preferred method of controlling animal populations in the state. That was, I think, Amendment 2, and it passed overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I recall that. We discussed that in a prior program. That's interesting. It goes to Nate's point. That is the Florida way of doing things. And I say a prayer for the family of the individual who was killed by the bear. That's horrible. I mean, it's like gator attacks. When there's an attack, obviously you identify the gator based on a certain size. If it can be you euthanize the animal, right? Which is what apparently they tried to do here, which is the proper response. But do we have a bear population issue, or do we have a people population issue? I mean, as David pointed out, there's a lot of. I mean, look what's happening down St. Johns County. I mean, these habitats are just being decimated. I mean, even where I live in Mandarin, I got the coyotes killed on my chickens. Now, I don't blame the coyotes, because the coyotes had nowhere else to go when they clear-cut 20 acres and built, these zero-lot line houses. So the animals, it's terrible.
And I mean, of course, we had a bear sighting on St. George Street in St. Augustine this week as well, and kind of running into Lincolnville. We've got a call from Joe in Riverside. Good morning, Joe. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. As a vegan, I'm against cruelty to the animals. Bears can be easily managed by removing food sources, securing garbage, securing bird feeders, pet food, and bear-proofing the residents. Bears are sentient beings and essential for our ecosystem. And please, stop cruelty to the animals, and go vegan. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. We also have an email from Paul. He says, what a shame it is that when an animal kills a human, there is a frenzy to kill every animal of that kind they can find. It's obvious that only one bear did the killing in Southwest Florida, and we don't know the circumstances, and yet the reaction has been to kill 3 bears so far. This retribution is just a poor excuse for people who want to kill bears. The solution is an overreaction based in ignorance. I do want to move on now to a topic. Duval County School Board this week updating a couple of policies. One, social media policies as they impact teachers and what they can post on their social media. And then also elimination of the Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program. This basically was a program aiming to make sure that new projects are, divvied up and include people that own a smaller minority-owned business. And so that's changing now in response to the president's stance on DEI and threats to strip federal funding from schools.
Yeah, in a way, the school district is really doing something that perhaps Jack was even on city council when this happened, where the city had sort of programs to incentivize or provide contracts to minority-owned and women-owned firms. And they ended that by creating a Jacksonville Small Emerging Business Program, which really based the assistance on the size of the business, regardless of the race or gender of the owner. And it sounds like that's what the school district did as well. It doesn't mean that you can't provide that assistance, but it's less targeted. And then you have to ask, how does that actually result in terms of actually helping people? And, it's women-owned and minority-owned businesses historically face challenges that are not there for other small business owners.
Jack, that transition in City Hall happened kind of right around the time of the Better Jacksonville plan, where there was going to be just billions of dollars spent, and there was some protest by the builders lobby to say, hey, this program is outdated. We don't need a racially, gender-based program. And so the city did away with it. And so there was a lot of people that said, hey, there's a lot of money that would have gone to minority contractors in this Better Jacksonville plan, but it was done away with.
It's interesting because David brings up a great point, because I think that program that you discussed, I don't know if it just was sunsetted or if there was some sort of directive to revamp it because of legal issues. I don't know. But I do recall, to your point, that worked with the late, great Denise Lee, because she was very concerned about the elimination of that program. And I recall the drafting and the creation of JSEB, Jacksonville Small Emerging Business, so as to provide relief for those previously, I don't want to say protected, but assisted groups, and at the same time making it constitutionally appropriate or okay.
Take a call from Eric on the south side. Eric, just very, very briefly, please.
Good morning. I was a library book vendor for 10 years in the 2000s to the school board and had some success. I worked part-time. And I would take weeks and many hours developing a quote, and then I would never hear back. Where's the purchase order? Well, you're not a minority. And so I have the manual. I still have it. I'm retired now. All African-American, male and female, all Asian, male and female, and all Hispanic, Asian and female, and white females. The only person that's not on the list was me, a white male. So this is a red letter day, and I'm glad that program is gone. Thank you.
Eric, thanks so much for your call. I appreciate it. And we're going to have to leave it there, fellas. Thank you so much for coming on today. Nate Monroe, David Bauerlein, Jack Webb.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Lawsuits involving strokes are complicated and require a special understanding of these life-changing events.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
On the next Electro Lounge, Saturday at 9 on WJCT News 89.9, we'll switch the news to fresh music to chill your weekend. Listen to the Electro Lounge Saturday at 9 p.m. only on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Florida Roundup, Property taxes. Republican lawmakers want to cut property taxes, but the state does not really have much control over them. One of the leaders of a new state committee in charge of coming up with ideas will join us live. Homeowners, do you get your money's worth in what you pay in property taxes? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then be sure to join us Friday noon until 1.
Is Donald Trump's economy the one most Americans can afford?
Think of us as a super luxury store, a store that has the goods.
Also on the Roundup, the latest on trade talks, due process, and fresh U.S. intelligence on gangs that the White House doesn't want to hear. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Playwrights young and old, or at least older, are presenting their latest work as part of the inaugural Red Moon New Works Theater Festival. Here to tell us about it is the event's creator, Ian Mayers, managing director at Apex Theater Studio in Ponte Vedra Beach. Good morning, Ian.
Happy Friday.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well, Ann.
We're also joined by student playwrights Peyton Kinnebrew and Deirdre Curtis. Peyton, Deirdre, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. So, Ian, you've been working as a director and an actor and a playwright and a producer in this market for 2 decades or so.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Absolutely.
But your current project is at Apex, and you've been there for about 10 years. So
yes.
What role does that play in the local theater community, particularly for young people?
Well, it was created for a kind of student who this is their calling. This is what they do. And so it's a place for them to gather and be a third space in a community. I had a group of students approach me about 12 years ago and say, I'm doing a play in the summer, but not everybody is as into it as I am. I just want to be with people who are really into it.
Yeah.
And so we started a summer camp, and 2 years later we opened our own brick and mortar, and boom, it's 11 years.
And so this is for some kids who are kind of doing theater perhaps in high school, but are really looking to augment it, or is it sort of replacing what they're doing in their schools?
Well, we actually start getting them at the age of 6.
Wow.
Yes. And so some of our students actually are already working professionally. And so they're looking for a place to keep honing their craft. So our focus really is 6 to 14. And then we encourage them to embrace their high school program and be a vital part of it. And then they'll come back in the summer and hang with us. But we want them to enrich their program. But, you have these parents who say, I have a 6-year-old who won't stop singing Hamilton.
Wow.
You need to help me.
Do something with them, please. Deirdre, you are in the student writing program at Douglas Anderson. How is the work that you're doing with Ian and at Apex, the playwriting work, is that different from the kind of writing that you have been doing for DA?
In a way, it feels the same. I would say it definitely introduced a new aspect because at DA, we don't exactly do script writing right now. So it definitely felt different, very different. Because all aspects of writing, you're introducing so many new things. So I would definitely say it was a new opportunity, very new for me. So.
And playwriting, I mean, it's interesting because you're working with sort of a limited window. The dialogue is constrained. And yet, there's sort of these instructions you can give the actors through your notes, and you're communicating. But you have to do it in a really kind of abbreviated form.
That is very true. I, as a writer, and especially for my fiction and nonfiction, I'm very descriptive. Like I love making sure my audience understands what I'm saying. That's what I'm heavy on. But when it comes to script writing, I just have to trust actors and my own dialogue really to just convey that message that I can't exactly say myself.
And Deirdre is kind of a serious play called Days to Forget that's going to be part of this upcoming performance. But Peyton, you're a little bit more of a comedic writer. You've got a play called The Social Counselor. And how do you come to that? I mean, it is, as we said, kind of working through very limited language. How do you approach that challenge?
Well, I try to
Well, let me ask you it in a different way. I mean, so you're creating a story, this social counselor story. You're basically asking the audience to kind of follow what you're instructing, through your actors, that they can kind of follow this storyline. How much of it do you begin with when you're, creating the play in the first place?
Well, I begin with an idea. Like, what is something that people are going to like? What is controversial right now that won't strike terror in their hearts?
Uh-huh.
I went with social media. I mean, the government's trying to ban it. Some people are just plain addicted to it. So I chose social media as to like get people interested and not offend them.
Uh-huh. But it is also, you're also trying to like make them laugh, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Make them laugh.
And he
Right.
succeeds at that. He succeeds at
He is
that.
got some good comic timing in
Very
his writing.
funny. Very funny. One of our mentors is New York playwright and TV writer Jackie Reingold. People would know her work from Law and Order,
Gracie and Frankie. Yeah.
And she was so amazed at how Peyton could take her notes and do a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
She'd say like, that kid, I give him notes and he turns it around.
Well, it's so cool that you have, outside professionals as well, have their eyeballs on your work and kind of help you shape it and give you some feedback. I mean, you're also doing a full play.
Yes. Well, we really want full-length works from student writers, but the first year we thought like that was a tall order. So Jackie and I both have plays that we've been working on. And so we thought, well, we'll do workshop productions of those, which means it's actually staged and actors are moving around and talking. And the student writers will have what we more of a traditional music stand reading, but with actors.
Yeah. And so this is a free performance.
Everything's free. It's all weekend at the studio. Go to apextheaterjax.com and you can, we have a tiny little performance space, so we encourage reservations.
Yeah, but their performances will be read by actors.
Yep.
And they'll be there kind of watching their work take shape.
Yeah, and we'll do feedback sessions after every reading.
Which is great. Yeah. So this is free. You can sign up because reservations are definitely encouraged. It's apextheaterjax.com/events. Ian Mayers, Peyton Kinnebrew, Deirdre Curtis, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ann.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have comments or questions, feedback, or suggestions, you can send any of it to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight or find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to listen Saturday at 4 when neurologist Dr. Joe Servin explores the mental health challenges for new moms in the military. And join us Monday when we ask the CEO of MOSH about the museum's plan for future layoffs and a 2.5-year shutdown. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Florida Theater presents Jim Henson's Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock Live, featuring puppet creatures from Jim Henson's Creature Shop, classic Fraggle songs, and immersive visual effects. Sunday, May 11th at 3 p.m. Information at floridatheater.com.